Becoming wealthy in the United States through real estate is wildly easy. Like most of our clients have regular jobs, regular income. They don't have anything special. They're not loaded. They didn't get a leg up in any way. They are willing to take on a little bit of risk. And welcome to Loans Elevated, the podcast that brings you the latest industry news, expert interviews, and insightful discussions that will help you stay ahead in this dynamic market. I'm your host, Broch Lassig, and I've spent years in the trenches of the mortgage industry, helping individuals and businesses navigate the complex landscape of real estate financing.
I'm your co-host, TJ Heidenreich, and together we'll cover a wide range of topics, from business strategies that skyrocket your success to mindset and motivation that fuel your growth.
All right. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sabrina Martinez. I'm a real estate agent here in the Salt Lake City metro area. I've been in the industry for about 16 years and a full-time agent for 4 years.
Awesome. And my name is Broch Lassig. I am a mortgage lender here in the Salt Lake City area. And I've been in the business for 16 years, but all of that time has been as a mortgage pro, doing loans as a loan officer. So grateful to be here and excited to talk about the topic today.
Yeah. So about a month ago, I came across a webinar that I sent over to Broch and thought that it discussed something that I'm hearing a lot from my clients. And the scenario are homeowners who have a substantial amount of equity in their home. They know the benefits of investing in real estate and have already committed to the idea that they want an investment property, but they're not sure which route to go because there's a lot of different ways and a lot of different strategies to achieve that. So the webinar that I went over discussed kind of 4 scenarios, and I thought that we discussed that today. And their 4 options are, do I do a cash out refi in today's environment where we have higher interest rates? Do I do a HELOC? Do I sell my primary and get 2 properties with that? Or do I convert my primary and get another to a rental and get another primary residence?
Yep.
So we talked about, kind of how that plays out, pros and cons, and, long-term picture, which scenario makes best sense? Is it a one-size-fits-all? So I thought we'd talk about, those 4.
Yeah, and I think it's really good. The value I think you'll get from today is Sabrina and I are complete and utter nerds about this stuff. Like we are obsessed with the idea of investing and how to strategize and how to think about it holistically for ultimate wealth creation. What I find, this will be a common thread in what we talk about today, is there are so many different ways of looking at it, and so many people get stuck in tunnel vision or linear thought processes, where in real estate it is so expansive and there are so many options and so many creative ways to mitigate risk, for example, and enable you to get into real estate investing much sooner and much easier than you might think is possible. So I'm excited to go over that stuff, but this is our passion collectively here. And so we're excited to share it with you, and hopefully you'll find some cool, interesting, clever takeaways from what we're sharing. So dive in. Let's just maybe start with one of the first things.
Yeah. Let's talk about the cash out refi.
Okay.
And does that make sense right now where a lot of homeowners have a 3% interest rate? Do they do a cash out refi in that environment?
For sure. Yeah, so both of us have clients that are coming to us with these questions on a routine basis, which is where this came from. And there are so many people that bought property in the COVID era. And even before, but the rates, and if they refied, their rates are super, super low. And so there's a common and, kind of a common sense thought of like, man, why would I ever let go of this mortgage rate that's so low? And it's like, it can freak people out. But a cash out refi, some things that I think about when I'm guiding my clients on, like, do you do a cash out refi to invest into other things, or maybe just to restructure your overall debt to empower you to get into real estate investing with other assets possibly? And the answer is it depends. But the cool thing is we have a lot of tools that can run this. Now, one common thing that we really work with a lot of clients on, because we are doing cash out refinances. I just took a client this month from a 2.75% 15-year fixed to a 6.875 30-year fixed refi, because they needed to reorganize some debt, wanted to get some capital, free things up so that they could go invest. And it made absolute sense because they ended up netting like $2,100 per month in extra cash flow. Now, the crazy thing is, despite the fact that we're increasing their mortgage rates so much, because we're eliminating other debts, they can take the global cash flow in the household and they can take that $2,100 per month, and their mortgage, despite the mortgage rate going up, their mortgage will be paid off like 2.5 years sooner than their current path, and they'll be 100% debt-free. Bear in mind, some of this debt we're consolidating is credit card debts. That never goes away with the payments they're paying. Yeah, exactly. You're just paying interest forever and ever. So, like, a cash-out refi may very well make sense, and counterintuitively could make sense. And then there's some other benefits that come that, I kind of use as sidebar benefits, which is, for example, when you take a mortgage from a 2.75 to a 6.875, you suddenly get tax benefits, income tax benefits, as a potential that you didn't have with the 2.75 rate.
Factor in.
Exactly, because none of that other debt is tax deductible.
Right.
So it's kind of like a hack, but freeing up thousands of dollars per month can put you in a position that allows you to, they could go buy 5 or 6 rental properties now with that cash flow situation and be in a really good position. Now, I guess I'll pause because that's one scenario. But then the other scenario would be you don't have a bunch of debt to consolidate, because there are people like that here in Utah, and you just want to pull some of your equity out to invest into a rental property through and through. And again, it still might make sense because if you can pull some of the equity, extend your loan term, you're going to have some subsidy basically. The payment's going to drop because you're extending your loan term back out, which will help with the cash flow situation on the potential rental property that you're looking at buying. So despite the fact that the rate goes up, the overall payment collectively could come down by doing this. And now you have a regular first mortgage attached to, in theory, your primary home, could be an investment property. But that interest, again, becomes tax deductible. So there's a benefit on the backside of this as well. So it could make sense, but then it kind of leads us perfectly into the second alternative to cash out refi, which would be HELOC.
Which would be HELOC. Yeah. So before we jump into that, I think that that's a really good point in that this isn't just I'm exchanging this for that. And that when it comes to finances and real estate and investing, like to scale out and look at the entire picture and overall the interest rate that you're paying across all of your debt and all of your assets. So I think that that's a super critical thing for people to consider, and why talking to a professional like you to break all of that down is so beneficial, whether or not genuinely you're looking to do that in, the next year. But that is like a long-term goal of yours, to meet with somebody like you who isn't just factoring and looking at today's rate versus the rate that you currently have, but the entire picture.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you bring that up, because one thing worth mentioning, like Sabrina and I are the pros. This is what we obsess about. We eat, breathe, and sleep mortgage and real estate. It's just what we love and know. And speaking with us, going through a consultation and understanding what your options are, understanding what the reality of the numbers are, getting unbiased thoughts and opinions that are also not emotionally attached. Like, whether you like it or not, you are emotionally attached to your financial position in your family or household. I am too in mine, but we are not. We want the best for you, of course, but we can take a more objective approach and coach you through different ideas. And we don't charge a dime to do a consultation with clients. Our goal is to educate and earn your trust and help you come up with a strategy so that we can earn your business on real estate transactions for the long term. So don't hesitate reaching out to us, to Sabrina's point. Like, that is what we're here for, and this is what we love doing.
We love, we geek out on this.
For sure.
Sitting with somebody and going through and strategizing your real estate goals, like your retirement goals, your generational wealth goals. Like, we love this stuff.
100%. I call it, in my business, I call it holistic mortgage planning. And as a matter of fact, just a quick plug, an ebook is going to be coming out soon. I'm in the midst of writing that now on holistic mortgage planning. But how I boil this down, I say that my competitors or other lenders are what I call McDonald's or drive-through mortgage, where you tell them what you want and they package it together. They put their hand out the window. You drive away with exactly what you asked for. On the other hand, we take a more serious approach in investing our intimate knowledge and strategy and experience in the industry to coach you through it. So holistic mortgage planning in my world, similar to what you were saying, we start by optimizing mortgage leverage. Some of that is this cash out refi that might be counterintuitive. That leads us into mitigating financial risks, which is a huge thing that oftentimes goes unseen or missed because you're so linear or tunnel vision on a concept. Mitigating financial risk is a big bucket that you need to be focused on. And there's multiple ways, which we're going to talk about, of doing that today. And then that ultimately leads us to the third pillar, which is maximizing wealth for the long term to give us all a better, more secure financial future, which is, I mean, that's what my motivation is that last component is like the main motivation.
Yeah, 100%. And I think for me, it boils down to truly understanding real estate as the powerful financial tool that it is. Mm-hmm. And it's so, and can be so much more than just the home that you live in.
Oh, yeah.
It is the most powerful financial tool that exists. And so using our expertise to guide people and to be able to maximize and optimize that.
Yep,
So
100%.
let's jump into the second scenario, the HELOC.
Yeah.
When
so in
does
that case,
make sense? And what are kind of the pros and cons to it?
It's a good question. I think we, on our team, we look at those pretty much just in tandem. So we'll look at, does a cash out make sense or does a HELOC make sense? And we'll just run both scenarios. What's going to be the most optimal, cost-effective, best cash flow improvement, best liquidity improvement? Obviously, there's individualized circumstances that will influence which one makes better sense or not. But from my perspective, it is a good way to keep the the low mortgage rate on the existing first mortgage. So that makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But sometimes that's not very beneficial depending on, now, thankfully, rates are starting to come down on that type of debt because the Fed funds rates are coming down.
Right.
So maybe a HELOC makes better sense because you can tap into a lot of the equity and still do the debt consolidation, still do all this stuff. The only disadvantage that you don't get, you can tap the equity, but you don't get that advantage of expanding the loan term. That's true. Pretty meaningful. Like those people that I told you that went from a 15 to a 30, they could never accomplish even remotely close to the same thing by getting a HELOC because it would just be an addition to their current mortgage. Whereas sometimes it makes better sense to just totally reorganize, take all the capital and dump it all into one loan, like into the mortgage, and you actually pay things off faster. So we look at them the same. HELOCs are really good. One cool thing is cash out refi on an investment property can be or a second home or something, can be very expensive and limited. You can't pull as much as you can on a primary home. So one cool value about a HELOC is you can pull equity through a HELOC on an investment property, sometimes in excess of what the cash out guidelines will allow. So that would be a time that we might use that. But we look at those two almost just interchangeably, and whatever one pencils out to be the most financially beneficial.
So if somebody hasn't quite decided on exactly what they want to do with their equity, they know they want an investment property, but they don't know, do I want a $300,000 condo? Do I want a $700,000 home? Like they haven't decided that yet. Does the HELOC give them more flexibility or time to kind of consider that? Is that something that
a good
would be a factor?
It's hard to say because frankly, I encourage people to analyze their goals and options and kind of cement some of those decisions before making a decision on whether it's a cash out or a HELOC.
Go, because that could, knowing all of those factors can greatly
it could totally change what we decide to do.
Right. So
that would be one cool thing is on a HELOC, this is something talking about the risk mitigation. Say you don't even need the capital. There are times that you want to get a HELOC, whether it's on your investment properties or your primary home. You want to get a HELOC in advance of ever even needing the money, because now you've got this access to liquidity, and that's something important. Like risk mitigation can be served by just having liquidity. It doesn't mean you need a bunch of cash, because if you can leverage, and it depends, of course, on your own personal tolerance for risk, but if you've got, $200,000 sitting in a HELOC, well, who cares if you have a bunch of liquid cash on the sidelines? You could just basically take that and invest it into real estate and have kind of the backstop, the financial backstop of a HELOC. So that would be another reason why, if you didn't need the money for a down payment, you didn't need to consolidate other debts, but we want to tap into the equity available to mitigate unforeseen risks in the future. You may not ever use it. that would be a really prime reason for a HELOC, is that.
Yeah, and to give you the option in case something too good to pass up comes across, and you're already ahead of the game.
That's true.
Have
You
it
can
ready
move
to
quick.
go.
And the crazy thing is, like I always tell people, like get proactive, get ahead of it on real estate and financing and HELOCs and things, because from a risk mitigation standpoint, again, that's a major focus of mine. You never know when you're going to need the extra liquidity. It might be an opportunistic reason, like buying an investment property, but it might be like, holy crap, I just lost my job, or there's a sickness, or there's something going on and you need capital. That would be another reason, like get yourself in a position where you can be as financially resilient as possible with all the unforeseen things that can come at us. That would be, I think that's a huge takeaway people need to think about, especially as you get into real estate investing.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's go to the next scenario, which is, do I sell my current primary home and just get two others? Do I get another primary? Do I get an investment with that equity?
Yeah, that's a good thought. And I mean, I think you'll have some impact on this as well. And it's so individualized. But another story, I like to talk just about real life examples because it helps make the point more clear. So I had a client, this was a few weeks ago. They came to me and they basically wanted to transition from homeowner to investor. So they were thinking, hey, I own this house. It's got a really low rate. I'm just going to keep that house, turn it into a rental, and buy myself a new primary. Now, through our holistic mortgage planning consultation, I went through and understood what this person's goals were at a deeper level. And there were some goals that were significant that wouldn't be accomplished in her doing that. Like she needed to fund her daughter's college education. Well, if you're not selling the house and liquidating that equity, you can't do that. Right. She also had some non-mortgage debt. If you're not selling and liquidating the equity, how are you going to pay that off? Because you can't just refi. Otherwise, you're going to refi to a higher rate and an investment property, which is even a little bit higher from a primary. So for her, and then we were looking at, and this is where you would come in a big way, is we're looking at like, okay, what's the value? How much equity do we have stored in that property? But then what is the rent and what is the current mortgage payment?
And doesn't make sense as an investment property.
Exactly.
So just because you have a 3% interest rate, if you have a large home with, there's not very many people in that market for that size of a home compared to I have a 3-bedroom, newer construction townhome, which makes an amazing investment. That's going to determine that as well.
Yep. In a huge way. And like what I tell clients to make that point clear is like, oftentimes when you buy a primary home that later you're thinking about turning into an investment property, you didn't buy that primary home in many cases you weren't looking down the lens of like, I need a good investment. You were looking down the lens of what's good for me and my family. What neighborhood do I want to be in? So on and so forth. But it might not be the right property type. And in this case, that was the exact example. This was a very big house, single family home. There was like $280,000 in equity. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was like $280,000 in equity tied up in this house. Her mortgage was like $2,300 a month, even though she had a really low rate. The rent was only $2,800.
Wow.
So when you account for all that, so then I'm like, all right, well, what if we did this? What if we sold it? You take some of that capital, pay off the $90,000 in other debts you have, like credit cards, auto loan, whatever. 100% debt free now. Take the other portion, buy a new primary home with 5% down, buy a purposeful investment property, like you said, like one of those townhomes or condos with 20% down. And when all things were said and done, she could sell this home. She could actually buy 2 rental properties, a new primary home, pay off all her debt, and fund $35,000 into a college fund for her daughter by selling instead of renting that out. And so, again, it's like so many things seem counterintuitive on the surface. And the other thing is that's worth mentioning. So many people, and I know you run into this too, they get their advice from family and friends that have bought and sold a couple of houses, and maybe they own a couple of rentals. It's like, I've done thousands of transactions
all day, every day.
Yeah.
And spend the time educating ourselves. We're, thoroughly understand the current market, the future market, different investment strategies, newer investment strategies. Like, this is what we do all day long.
And real world, like every day, all the time, we have real world case studies with our clients every day. So we're like, oh crap, I didn't think about that. That's a good way to implement this in people's lives. Like, there's just so much to think about, and there's so many options. So I think to the question, do you sell or do you rent your vacating primary home? That was the main gist of the question, right?
I think it boils down to
depends.
What are you currently in? What is your home currently? And looking at that unique scenario to see what makes the most sense. There really isn't a blanket like this is what you do.
Yep. There's no blanket answer, but it is significant in understanding from Sabrina's analysis. Is this a good investment property? Is it in a good area that's going to continue appreciating in rents? Is there a better way to reposition your money into a different place, a different property? That's what she can do. And then I can help just choreograph, like, what do we do with the cash and how do we make this work for you in the most optimal way, mitigating the risk, getting you in a position where wealth just explodes. And it really can. I like this woman, I think it was like in a 15-year period she could retire based on these little decisions we were making. It's like, that is powerful. Ridiculous.
That's literally life-changing.
Yeah. And her daughter's education's paid for.
Yeah. That's incredible.
And she's just a freaking homeowner. She only owns one house right now.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that I want to encourage people to understand is becoming wealthy in the United States through real estate is wildly easy. Most of our clients have regular jobs, regular income. They don't have anything special. They're not loaded. They didn't get a leg up in any way. They are willing to take on a little bit of risk and rely on professionals like us to coach them through the ideas and not move forward in fear, taking advice from people that are fear-ridden. Like so many of our family members, their advice is based on a bad experience, and that is just fear-ridden advice. And it's, you got to just be cautious with that.
Yeah, it can leave somebody shackled and has a big impact on your future. Yep. And I think just talking to both sides of that discussion of hearing that scenario and how powerful and life-changing that was, and the difference of what if she did nothing, and what if she listened to that fear and stayed in her home and didn't make those decisions and those changes, and how does that really affect her in 5, 10, 20 years?
Yeah.
It is so powerful.
And as a matter of fact that you bring that up, we should throw this on the screen. So there's a graph here that we can show you. We'll throw this on the screen, but this graph shows that if you bought a $574,645 house. So that was the time I pulled this, the median in Salt Lake County was the price. If you bought that based on forecasted appreciation, which is forecasted at 4.77% per year, that is the 7-year average. And we've seen many years over the past 10 to 15 that are dramatically higher than that.
And we could talk about how Utah differs and kind of the growth and projections here.
Exactly, because I think we do see some more pops way beyond that. But forget about it. That's kind of gambling. Let's not gamble. Let's look at tried and true numbers. And then, it's just all gravy if we get some big pops like we're expecting. But talking about the long-term value here. So you buy this $574,645 house. In 10 years, that house is worth $916,000.
Conservatively.
Very conservative. It's insane. And you think about what's called amortization, which we'll show on the screen as well. Amortization is basically, you can't forget, you're paying the mortgage down little by little every single month. So there's, over a long period of time, there's a significant gain of equity and cash available in real estate over time. So in 10 years, you buy we'll just call it $75,000 house. You buy that in 10 years, you've turned into a net equity position of $525,000. Yeah. That is
$500,000
in cash.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Super cool stuff. So
let's talk about something we didn't really go into this, and we kind of talked it on a broader scale though, is mitigating negative cash flow.
Yes.
So if right now interest rates, especially investment loans, are higher, it is tough in our market to cash flow.
Yep.
It's a reality that a negative cash flow is likely going to be the case for several years. So how do we mitigate that? What strategies do you have? What recommendations or advice do you have for your clients?
It's a good question. And I'm sure you also understand and coach your clients the same way. I know that you and I are very aligned with this, but one thing that people get caught up on is cash flow on investment properties. And you have to recognize there are different markets for different purposes. You can find areas in the United States that do have pretty significant cash flow relative to the amount you're investing in these properties. The challenge with those areas is the value of the real estate is much lower and the appreciation rates are much lower. So let's just say, for example, you got an area that's a $250,000 average investment property price point. Well, that area may only appreciate at 0, 1, or 2% per year. So in 10 years, that appreciation, we're only talking maybe like $50,000 in
Right.
equity gained over that long period of time, but you've got some cash flow. So intuitively, it seems to make better sense. You look at a market like Utah, and the real estate's just more expensive. And with the higher rates that we have experienced, it just is difficult to cash flow unless you invest a very significant amount of money into the property, which may not make sense, even though on the surface it might seem to. But the value you get here in Utah, you might not get the cash flow. It might even be negative cash flow. But when you look at the appreciation gain over time, it's tremendously more. So it's like, what is your target? What is your goal? And so I think that's one thing. You need to understand what you're shooting for. But we can put this on the screen as well, which is an investment property analyzer. And we can do custom reports like this for anyone watching. We can pull a custom report for any property in any zip code in the entire United States. So it is a really cool, powerful tool. But we took one conservative based on the same median price point in Utah. So I took that same 574, 645 house, and I showed what is that type of property here in Utah going to rent for. And we've taken into account rental expenses, property management expenses, property taxes increasing over time, homeowners insurance increasing over time, repairs and maintenance. We've taken all of that into account. So it's a very comprehensive analysis. But when you look at the cumulative cash on cash return, you look at that graph and it's showing that for the first 1, 2, 3, 4, actually 5 years, you're technically negative cash flow. And over a 10-year hold, you actually were negative cash out of pocket or cash on cash return, meaning the cash you got in cash flow you were negative over a 10-year period. So you actually outlaid money on a monthly basis, even over a 10-year period to own this property. So that might seem like a bad idea. However, now you look a little bit lower and you see appreciation gain. Well, now that home over a 10-year period, you just made $341,000 plus the amortization gain, which gives you a total net profit after paying real estate fees, every expense associated with that is foreseeable associated with owning the real estate. You made a net profit in a 10-year period of $342,000. Divide that by 10 years, that's $34,000 a year. We're talking like nearly $3,000 a month in profit, even though the cash flow was not very significant. To get $3,000 a month in profit in another market that cash flows is virtually impossible.
Impossible.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So that is important. But now the question becomes, which is kind of what you asked, and I went on a tangent there, but I thought it was important to make this point clear. But now the question becomes, well, I can't afford negative cash flow.
Right.
So this is a non-starter for me. That's where a lot of people go. But that's where some of these other tactics come into play. Does a cash out refi make sense? Does a HELOC make sense? Does, a lot of people are like, hey, I'm going to do 30% down on my investment property to help with cash flow. It's like, well, what if we did 20% down instead of 30? You reserve that 10% in cash, throw it in an operating account into the property. That 10% subsidizes your negative cash flow over a 10-year hold. And now you're not out of pocket, and you own the property in a high appreciating market, granted low cash flow. And over time, you basically don't interrupt your spending, your monthly budget, but you dramatically increase your wealth and net worth over time. So that's where it comes that's the optimizing leverage piece and mitigating
that's where
risk
the
piece.
Strategy comes in,
Exactly.
and having that consultation to look at their unique situation and how do we move these puzzle pieces around to make it work. You have a goal to retire in 15 years. You have a goal to have a vacation home on a beach somewhere. Like, what is your goal? What is your situation? And then you and I come together to come up with a plan.
And we don't get fixated on nope, negative cash flow, can't do it.
Exactly. Because
So
we
many people do
understand that that's not the market that we're in, but there's substantial benefit to that.
And there are solutions. Most people can't afford to pay an extra $500 a month in negative cash flow to own a rental.
Right.
They just can't.
Right.
But there's simple solutions. Another one that I didn't mention. A lot of people have a retirement account, 401k, IRA. Well, let's just borrow some money from that, throw it in an operating account, subsidize it, and now you own the property and you're creating wealth. But we're doing it in a way that mitigates the risk, and we're optimizing things. And the creation is just, it's absurd. There's no other way to create this amount of wealth. Because like going back to that 540, the 575 rental property, we go back to that. You make $343,000 in profit on that in a 10-year period. Well, on that home, you only invested 20% down.
Right.
So you invested $115,000.
Right.
Divide that by your return of $343,000. Other way around. 343 divided by 115. That's 298% return over a 10-year period. So that means you just made 30% return on investment over a 10-year span. Like, no 401k does that. Crypto does not do that. No other investment can provide this. Not to mention,
nothing else touches it.
Not to mention the tax benefits. You literally
I was going to say that. Yeah, we haven't even talked about that. The tax benefits of owning investment properties. Like, that's a whole other discussion.
And it can be tremendous. Thousands of dollars per year you can benefit. That's not even baked into any of these equations. So anyway, that's obviously. I'm a proponent of it, even if there is negative cash flow. Just get creative on how to solve the issue.
So I think that the ending message to those 4 scenarios, it really is, it's going to depend. It really does take that one-on-one strategy session and looking at your unique goals, what properties you're currently living in, and what makes most sense. But what I found so powerful is at the end of it, no matter which route you go, 2 is always better than 1. Oh, yeah. Having 2 properties is always better than just the 1.
Because you're getting that appreciation over time. And it's, literally it's double the money.
And it doesn't matter what interest rate environment you're in. Even in the higher interest rate environment we're in right now, it always makes sense to over 1.
Yeah.
So the other thing that we had listed here was, where to buy, what to buy. In terms of, that's a very common, and I know that that's something that I would have a bigger voice in that. And
I'm curious what your take is, like, because there's so many different considerations.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, in my view, depends on the goals. Like,
100%.
How complex do you want this?
Yeah.
How passive do you want it? There's different solutions to different desires,
Yeah.
So.
No, and that's it, is understanding, what their goals are, what their, risk level is, how much they want to be involved in it. Do they want to use that other property for personal use?
Right.
Or is it just strictly an investment property? Do they want something local? Do they, want to invest in one of those other markets, that are a lower entry, but a higher cash flow? Maybe that makes sense for a couple of years. So there's a lot that goes into it. I'm biased here, but I'm a huge advocate for new construction to purchase as an investment property. I know a lot of people, look at those. They often have an HOA and they discredit that and say, oh, I don't want anything with an HOA. But I think that there's a lot of benefits to purchasing new construction. One, you have low CapEx. So, the home's not going to need repairs. It's going to attract a high quality tenant. Because those are usually nicer, newer areas. Often with that HOA, you have great amenities, which also attract a higher quality of a tenant. But it's also why, those homeowners, those first-time home buyers who did buy these new construction townhomes and smaller single-family homes over the last several years and do have that equity, like that is prime situation for you to convert that into a rental and buy something else. And also advice that I give for first-time home buyers, we kind of touched on this earlier, is you purchase that first home with a lot of emotion and what made sense for your family. Well, I'm an advocate to educate those first-time home buyers to look at their first home as a future investment. And we just kind of highlighted the power of what that can do for your future if you really go in with that lens. It's not your forever home. This is a future investment property. So again, while I advocate for new construction.
Yeah, and I think I would add a couple things because again, like I think both of us attempt to take. I try to be super unbiased and just lay things out and analyze things the same way I would if I was putting my own family's money into a deal. And some things I think about new construction, because I'm personally in this place. Like, I'm a fan of new construction too. New construction, townhomes, condos in nice up-and-coming areas. You get young families, they're powerful. The challenge is you're dealing with renters, right? You want people to rent this property. So your competition, you got to look at, like, what are the communities, apartment and or townhome communities that are larger? What do they have, and what does your competition look like? Because in some of these up-and-coming areas, you've got apartment communities that also have townhomes and garages and different things, really nice apartment communities that have bowling alleys and state-of-the-art facilities on site because they can subsidize that cost because the projects are hundreds, if not thousands of units. So you got to, understand, like, what risk do you run from a competition standpoint? And that's one reason why you might say, wait a minute, maybe I don't want to be in that up-and-coming area because there's this either currently built or upcoming apartment building. And if you've seen some of these apartment buildings as an investor, like, they're way nicer than a townhome community.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's kind of ridiculous.
The amenities, yeah.
It's nuts. And so if I was a renter, like, I think about it that way. Well, I would live in the apartment community with the bowling alley and the bar and all this stuff
over the condo,
versus the townhome development. Otherwise I'd be a homeowner in a townhome development. So that's one thing to think about.
Demand.
Exactly. Demand, supply, like, what are the variables? And that's what Sabrina can help with. She knows what's happening in these little markets and can help you assess some of this risk. But then, there might be a reason to say, hey, let's go in an up and coming area that is kind of on the fringe. Let's buy a single family home that's been well kept, low maintenance, that's got new furnace, so on and so forth. But maybe it's on a bigger lot, and maybe over 20 years, that property turns into something that you can redevelop into a multi-unit. And so now, like, that investment depends on what your goals are again. Right. But there are so many different ways to look at it. You mentioned briefly, like, nightly rental, vacation homes.
Right.
You can use rental income to qualify for those and then still stay in them. It can be a profitable place for you and your family to go play. Like, that is pretty cool.
Right. And Utah's an amazing market for that, for people that purchase it as, the flexibility of it as a second home, as a vacation home, but then subsidize that with a nightly rental income. So great option. Another area that I'm, talking a lot about and advocating for people to buy investment properties is like the Glendale Rose Park area. That's definitely has a lot up and coming and, a lower price point.
And that's something that a typical homeowner wouldn't even consider or think about or understand as a good opportunity. And that's the value of a realtor like Sabrina, who is really just way beyond a realtor. Just like I believe I'm way beyond just a regular loan officer. Like, we just know so much. Like, we're in the community. We understand. We're constantly, like, hearing from the cities and, like, what's up and coming. Like, we're in the know, and that is so meaningful when you're making decisions on where to put your money, because it can be the difference of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. It can be the difference of a loss or a gain to know the intimate details about the market. So local market pros are important. We have resources around the country, mind you. If you're not buying in Utah, both of us have resources in all 50 states all around the country to help support in these decision-making processes when you're looking to invest. Obviously, we're biased to Utah, but if you are somewhere else, we would also be happy to help. To close things up, one extra credit piece that we were looking at notes on making sure that we hit all the topics, and there was one piece that I missed, which is that idea of selling your real estate. And it could be a rental or a primary home. Kind of doesn't matter, but in particular, a primary home, considering selling it versus renting it. I didn't mention this, but in the current tax code, there are tax advantages or tax exemptions, we should call them, where you can net cash in your pocket tax-free when you sell a primary home. There's certain limitations, but generally speaking, each person, so a single person filing single would get $250,000 in tax-free equity when they sell. A married couple would have $500,000 tax-free equity. And bear in mind, that's tax-free profit. So that's from the basis of the home to the net sales price. So if you bought the home for $500 and put $50,000 down, and you only owe $450, and you've paid it down another $20,000 because you've been in the house a while making mortgage payments, you only owe $430. That $70,000 is not equity, so that's never taxable. It's from the basis to the basis is what's taxable. So in an example like this, you could technically sell the home for $800,000, subtract fees and commissions and stuff off of that. You net $750,000. You bought it for $500,000, so you net $250,000 in true gain. That becomes, for a single person, tax-free money. So that's significant, because if you figure the taxes for capital gains is 20% at that earning level, 20% capital gains, you just made a tax profit of $50,000. And even if you assume it's a little bit less than that because of the steps in capital gains, you made a tax profit of tens of thousands of dollars by selling the property and netting the capital now, as opposed to turning it into an investment, which in the future that equity would be taxable. So you got to think through, does it make sense for me to sell, capitalize, take the tax profit now? Because how long would it take for me to make that type of cash flow profit on this property, even if it is cash flowing, to catch up with that? So maybe selling, capitalizing on the tax benefits, and reinvesting will make better sense. So that's a little extra credit piece I forgot to mention, but that's all I have. Any other thoughts from your side?
I think, the main point of, let's have a discussion about this. Let's schedule a call. Let's look at your goals. Let's look at your unique situation and come up with a plan, whether you're looking to do this within the next year or the next 5 years, 10 years. Like it definitely will put you at an advantage to meet with us, to discuss what your goals are and come up with a plan.
And there's no cost, there's no obligation, and free professional advice and guidance on how to make these decisions. So to reach out to us, wherever it's posted, there will be links in the bios to contact us and get this ball rolling. And we would love to be your pros that you rely on. So thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. For more industry insights, follow us on all platforms at Loans Elevated.
And to get in touch with our team, call or text 801-713-4000 or visit loanselevated.com.